Rev up your engines!
Here we have Volkswagens that might start on fire, and these are 2022 models. Hey, it's still 2021, you know, that tells you. Fuel connector might detach under the hood and start on fire. Brilliant, right? It's one of those quick connectors. You know why they make quick connectors? Because it's cheaper to build them that way. Back in the day, they were all bolted together, solid. Now they're just snap-on. Guess what? They can snap off if they don't make them right, and that's the problem with these Volkswagens. So not only could it start a fire, but if it came off, the car could stall. You're going down a highway, boom, somebody runs into you. And Volkswagen even says there's 3 reasons this could happen. Improper tolerance between the fuel line and the connectors, a deformation of the connector during the production, or a problem with the size of the fuel line. Sounds like Volkswagen's got quality controls here big time. Now this is 16,737 Volkswagen Tahoe SUVs from 2022. Yes, as new as they come. Their fixes at Volkswagen will inspect your line, and if they think it's bad, they'll replace it. Oh great, you know, not replace them all. Yeah, I can't wait till they tell somebody it's good and then it isn't, and it goes out and they get sued, you know. They're so cheap, they want to save money on everything. You know, well, we won't replace it, we'll just inspect them. If you're worried you got one of those things, go to the National Highway Traffic Safety Association.org website, put in your VIN number, it'll tell you if yours is recalled or not. But it just shows, again, lack of quality control and cheaper productions of cars. And then when you got to take them apart, a lot of times it's harder to take them apart. And then they break when you take them apart, so you got to buy a new one. When they used to be bolted together, hey, you take them apart, put them together, take them apart, no problem. Maybe change the gasket. These, a lot of times they break, you got to replace the whole thing. They're just making them as cheap as they can. And Volkswagen went so far, they're so cheap, they leak or they come apart. Then says, do you think a Ford Edge is a good SUV? What year should I get? Only 3.5 liter V6 is available where I live. Well, I wouldn't buy one of those engines. Those are the engines that have the problems with the water pumps right off the timing chain, bad design. No, you want a good SUV, get a Toyota or a Honda. Those are the best SUVs. I'm sure they sell them there in the Middle East, here in Qatar, but I would not buy a Ford Edge. They're okay. Toyotas and Hondas are great SUVs. Why settle for okay when you can get great? And if you're talking about brand new, the price differential isn't all that much. That's the problem with Americans. They don't make the quality vehicles that they used to. They're competing with the Japanese, but when the Japanese raise their price, they raise theirs too, because they think, oh, they raise theirs, we'll raise ours too to make money, instead of saying, we'll be a lot lower price, we'll sell more. No, they immediately make it up to try to get more per unit. Greed. It's basically what the world goes on these days. Like ages ago, you could get Korean cars much cheaper than Toyotas and Hondas, and the quality was much lower. Now, the quality is somewhat better, but they pretty much raised their prices, so they're almost the same cost as the Toyotas and Hondas, so they're gonna last as long. The same thing with the Ford Edge. OBR, Duncan Noby says, I want to save the memory of my computer, but you have to use an OB2 emergency power supply cable memory saver. Can I just hook up one of those 12-volt lithium starter to the battery cables when you switch it off? I wouldn't advise doing that for one reason. Those jump starters are made to jump start a car. They're made to give a lot of electricity for a short period of time. If you just hook them up, some of them aren't even supplying power until you push the button to start it up. But 4 of different ones out there. I don't know which one you'd have, because I've tried stuff like that and I find out, well, the power pack doesn't give power unless you're cranking the engine. If it just sits there, it's not giving power, there goes your memory. So they're not designed for that. It's just as easy to get. The memory savers, geez, I can get them for what, 15 bucks on Amazon. I wouldn't trust those little jump starters because a lot of them don't give power for very long. A lot of them, you turn them on and after a certain period of time, they just shut themselves off. You're better off with a saver with a 12-volt supply that's just there all the time. It only makes sense to get a battery that's an actual battery that's always putting out power. Not this electronically controlled thing that's got a lithium battery that might be on some of the time, off some of the time. A regular 12-volt battery's on all the time. You hook it up. You're better off with that. The Mercury Cougar says, what's more reliable, 2011 Tahoe or a Sequoia? That's not even a question in the real world. Sequoia is so much more reliable. Now, yeah, I told people about V8s. Well, that's the Lexus V8, because the Lexus V8, they're very complex cars. Everything costs a fortune. The Sequoia is different. They're very reliable. I've got customers who have 300,000 miles on those things. Now, realize they're tremendous gas hogs. They're big, heavy vehicles. What do you think of Sequoia, right? Sequoia, the big trees, the big redwood trees, right? They're big and giant, and of course, they get horrible gas mileage. They weigh how many hundreds or thousands of tons, those giant redwood trees? So That's the only problem, you know? GM products don't hold up nearly as long as that. But the Sequoia, they last a long time. They're just gas hogs. That's all. You can afford to get horrible gas mods like that. You know, that'd be the vehicle you'd want to buy. Don't even think about comparing it to a Tahoe. They're in completely different universes. The name says, I'm thinking about buying an 87 Oldsmobile Tornado, 91,000 miles. No rust, the interior, super good. Realize that was one of the first big American vehicles that was front-wheel drive. Big old V8 engines with front-wheel drive. Americans never were that good at front-wheel drive. If you're thinking about buying that car, my advice is take it to an older mechanic like me that understands them. Have them check the transmission out. It's probably going to need the transmission rebuilt. Now, if the transmission was rebuilt and they have paperwork, fine and dandy. It's kind of a cool looking car. It's a piece of American history. If you like a big old monster car that you don't steer, but you kind of glide through the turns like a ship going around a peninsula or something, go right ahead. But do have a guy check out the transmission. That is the weak points in those front-wheel drive Tornadoes. They're kind of bizarre looking cars if you like something like that. And the tranny's good and it runs good. What the heck? 99 says, I want a smaller truck. What do you think of the 2022 Maverick and all-wheel drive with the 2-liter turbo and the new 2022 Frontier 4-wheel drive that was redesigned? I want a small truck, and those piqued my interest. Personally, I'd get a Toyota Tacoma myself, and it could run forever. But out of those, I go with a Nissan because Nissan makes decent pickup trucks. The Maverick is brand new. I believe they're all being made in Mexico. I would not trust it till they've been out 4 or 5 years to see how they hold up. The Nissan Frontiers have been out a long time, and they're pretty good pickup trucks. I would basically rate the Toyota pickups as the best pickups. Then the Fords, but I wouldn't touch the new Maverick. It would be a Ford Ranger. And then I'd rate the Frontiers as like number 3. So they're not bad. I'd go Frontier out of those just because they've been around. Don't buy something that's brand new, especially something brand new that's been made in Mexico. I would wait on that one. I would wait a long time to see how they pan out. Now, the Tacomas that have been made in Mexico for Toyota, and they're decent. They have some decent track records. I had a customer with 200,000 miles. I wanted to look brand new, so I wouldn't trust that Maverick till they've been out a while. Mr. E says, what's a Jaguar lifespan? I know Jaguars are unreliable, but you had that video on an S-Type, and you made an exception for it. Mine has 60,000 miles and is an 01. I want to know how many miles I can get out of it. All right, well, here's the thing. The mileage is low. That's not the problem. But it's a 20-year-old Jaguar, and they always get electrical problems as they age. Now, they're beautiful, but, you know, the quality control isn't the greatest. Now, you don't have that many miles. It's 20 years old, right? You only got 60,000 miles, so you're not putting that many miles on it. So you never know. You could treat it as a toy, not an everyday driver. Maybe you could keep it as a toy, you know, and keep it up, garage it. Don't drive it out in the winter if they put salt on the road. The electronics will eventually go bonkers on that thing. It is a 20-year-old Jaguar. Realize that. And when those start going, those things aren't cheap, but they're not easy to diagnose either. Rick's Bad Car says, on my wit's ends, I got 2010 Toyota Corolla. The battery light comes on and down, sometimes down to 9 volts, and then it works a full 14 volts. I've replaced the alternator twice, and it still comes up. The connector was loose, but it gives low voltage, even though I tightened it up. My advice, if the connector was loose, those plug-in connectors, get another one. You can buy the connector with wires, then splice those wires, cut the old connector off, splice them in, get the bare copper, twist them up, twist them around, like snakes around each other, then solder it with solder, then put that heat shrink wrapping on it and heat it up with a hairdryer so it doesn't get any corrosion in it. That, odds are, what your problem is, because that's the only thing I ever see in Toyotas. I would say replace that plug-in connector because they will get bad, and then you hit a bump, it's loose, it's tight. Change that out. You can go to any good auto parts store and you can buy the plug that goes in and then rewire. That should solve your problem 100%. I fixed tons of them that way, especially ones that come from up north with a lot of rust on the road, and then things corrode and then the terminals don't work anymore. Bob the Hadkin says, are diesels easy to do it yourself? What about tools, equipment? No, they aren't. Now, back in the day, diesels were mechanical fuel injection. Simpler. They were mechanical. You didn't have to deal with all this electronic stuff, but it cost an awful lot of money to make a mechanical diesel fuel injection pump. It has to be machined perfectly. So ages ago, decades ago, most of the manufacturers have gone to electronic diesel controls. They are so complex, you need high-level scan tools like I have that start at about $5,000. And you need all kinds of tools to analyze them, to work on them, and all kinds of expensive data systems to get the information of how to test them and what the correct data should look like. So no, they're not really do-it-yourself stuff at all anymore. Now, the old ones, like I say, they were mechanical, things could be done. You still needed special tools. The modern diesels are all electronic computer controlled, and man, they're not stuff that you can work on. A lot of mechanics won't touch modern diesels because they don't know, and they're not going to spend all the money for that special equipment. A lot of mechanics will not work on diesels for that reason, say, no, I don't want to mess with those. repairs. There's not that many of them in the United States. The guys that specialize them generally work on diesel trucks, and they make serious money working on commercial diesel trucks. It's a completely different ballgame. But if you're talking about a private individual buying a consumer diesel, that's one of the reasons they were never popular in the United States, aside from that they're kind of slow and that they smell a lot. They're not easy to fix, and I know people that have bought diesels and they said, Scotty, biggest mistake, I'll never buy another diesel because of the repair hassles of them when they do finally break down. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.